Thank you for tuning in to the Marching Health Podcast. We have a hot take today on shoe wear, so I'm really excited to bring this information to you, and it is based off the latest and greatest research in the running shoe world and in the physical therapy and rehab and exercise world. So there's a lot of opinions about shoes. Some people can get upset about certain types of shoes that we talk about if you take too hard of a stance on it, and know that there's a lot of flexibility in the shoe wear industry. Both figuratively, meaning there's a ton of different ways to go, and literally, like, different shoes have different flexibilities that are going to determine whether or not you need to wear them. So the very first thing that's going to benefit you is just knowing a little bit more about your feet as the consumer, as the performer. And we want to talk about how we can help you choose the right shoe for the outdoor marching activity. I'm not talking about indoor. That's a different ballgame as far as shoe wear is concerned. But for outdoors, you know you're going to be outside. It's going to be hot. You're going to be on a field or on an asphalt field or on a grass field at some point. And you got to make sure that you are treating yourself right from the ground up and getting good shoes on your feet. We know that not having proper shoe wear puts you at risk of injury, and we want to help you have the best information possible for that. So you should, or you may have thought about what your foot type is. You may hear some words when you're going out to shop for shoes, or if you're in the exercise world, called pronation, which a lot of people use to describe when your foot caves in and is really flat to the ground. Or you may hear words like supination. That means that your foot has a higher arch, and you tend to be more on the outsides of your feet as you are moving. Those are the extremes of motion when we talk about the foot and ankle. And some people are on either end of the spectrum, and a lot of people are somewhere in the middle in this kind of gray zone of, do I rotate or do I supinate a ton? Do I overpronate a ton? But the important thing is not to get lost in that too much. If you have a dysfunction of that, meaning if you know, hey, I've had flat feet that have caused me pain and caused me injury, I would encourage that you go get care from a medical provider. You may need to go to physical therapy. You may need to see a podiatrist. You may need to get orthotics made. But I want you to make sure you're getting the care you need. This information may not be for you, but for the other people who are not currently dealing with an injury, I want them to know that shoe manufacturers are going to put neutral. They're going to put supinator. They're going to put pronator on the tongue of a shoe or on the shoe label. And that doesn't really mean a ton. We've looked at the research of this, and we've tried to match people up based on what their foot looks like and what we think what shoe would fit them best. And it actually sometimes works the opposite. People who supinate a ton and have really high arches do better in shoes that we tried to make for people who pronate. So the big thing you need to take away, and the number one point you need to take away, is that the shoe needs to feel comfortable on your foot. I can't tell you what shoes to buy. They need to feel good when you put them on, and they need to feel good when you move. Your foot standing still is very different than your foot movement when you are actually marching. So you need to get shoes that feel good doing both of those things. Now let's talk about marching for a second. People who are in percussion have different demands than those who are in hornline or who play a woodwind instrument. And people who are in color guard have very different demands as well. So you can't have one pair of shoes prescribed for each of those individuals. Percussionists move more side to side because of crabbing. They need a shoe that has more support in the forefoot. You don't want a shoe that's really sloppy and that you can bend a ton in that forefoot area. Horn players, you guys march more heel to toe than any other section. You probably need a shoe that has a little bit more cushioning in the heel because of that. And make sure that as you're trying these shoes on, and this goes for everyone, you need a mini march in the actual store. And when I say mini march, I mean do like small, steps forward, do a direction change to the side, do what you would do on the field so that you get accustomed to what this shoe feels like when you do those movements. It needs to adapt to those movements really well and not just to running. So one of the big mistakes is going to a running shoe store and asking a running professional what you need. You want to ask the running professional to watch when you move to let them know how you move, for them to let you know how you move. If they can do that, then you can say, okay, well, I'm going to try this shoe on because you recommend it for me, but I'm also going to march in that shoe. I'm not going to run in that shoe. I'm going to march in that shoe. Running and marching are two different things. And when you start getting into direction changes, and especially percussion going side to side, that shoe needs to support you. We do something called a rag test, where you get the shoe and you try to wring it out like a rag. You don't want it to cave too much. You don't want it to fold in the midsection under your arch too much if you're a horn player or percussion player, because you need that arch support. But let's talk about color guard. Color guard is a very mobile and flexible movement section. So you have to really have not just flexibility in your body, but also control of that flexibility in your foot and ankle. And you guys don't necessarily need to use a shoe that is also really rigid like a hornline player might. Color guard members probably need a shoe more like a Nike Free or something that gives them a little bit more of that leeway. So the rag test probably doesn't apply to you as much as long as you've been wearing a more flexible shoe. Color guard members, if you have been in dance classes and you've worn a dance shoe before, those are very flexible shoes. You would probably fit right in with something like a Nike Free or something that's similar to that as far as the mobility that the shoe gives you. If you choose something that's too rigid, that's not going to feel great when you try to make really challenging choreographic moves or dance moves happen. Let's talk about some general tips of actual shoe wear and shoe choice. I want to make sure that when you finish your day of rehearsal, you kick your shoes off and you elevate your feet up. Do that as much as you can. And I'm talking about when you get out at 9 or 10 p.m. from whatever band camp or spring training rehearsal day it is. Put your feet up, put them up on the end of the couch, lay totally flat, put your chest down on the couch so that that fluid that builds up throughout the course of the day, because gravity pulls some fluid down, gravity drives everything down to your feet. Let that fluid go back down and back into circulation by propping your feet up and elevating them. I try to steer people away from using black shoes and using dark colored shoes to march in. Personally, when I marched Spirit of Atlanta, I tried to wear black shoes, and it was so hot in Georgia that the black shoes actually caused blisters on my feet. And then I tried to put Band-Aids on the blisters, and those Band-Aids melted to the skin of my feet. My feet were about 5 to 10 degrees hotter at all times than the rest of my body when I wore those shoes. I also had a pair of light blue shoes that never gave me any of those same problems. Part of that is due to the color of the shoe attracting heat, and part of that is due to the breathability of the shoe. So make sure you are looking at the material that the shoe is made with to make sure it's breathable. If you're going to march in drum corps or march in marching band during the summertime, make sure that you're trying to get something that's lighter colored so that it's not attracting that heat quite so much. We recommend that you get multiple pairs of shoes. There's a lot of research to say that you are at less risk of injury if you use more than one pair of shoe. That is because your lower leg adapts to having different demands underneath it. Think about that. If you use one pair of shoes the whole season, those pair of shoes wear out and your body's only used to that. Versus if you give it 2 different pair of shoes, you alternate weeks with those shoes or even alternate rehearsals, your foot and your ankle have to differentiate those different feelings in it. And they basically get stronger and build up more what we call proprioception in the joints to be able to be more adaptable. We want you to change pairs of shoes every 300 to 500 miles. Band kids don't usually know what that means unless they're in cross country or they run a lot. 300 to 500 miles sounds like a ton. It's not in the band world. As an instructor, I used to get about 10 miles a day on my feet. Performers get much more than that. And when you do the math, 10 miles a day, and we're talking about 300 to 500 miles needing to change out your shoes, you probably need 2 to 3 pair of shoes to get you through the season. I know that can be strapping financially for people. So if we're talking to a marching band, I want to recommend that if a kid only gets a pair of shoes each year, or even less often than that, that they're considering seeing if they can do some part-time work over the summer to make sure that they're able to get a good pair of shoes on their feet for the season, because that's really one of the most important things you can do to prevent injury during the season. Have a good pair or 2 on your feet. And lastly, we want to talk about what not to wear. Don't wear your Converse out on the band field. Don't wear Sperry's. Don't wear Vans. those are not made for this activity. Those are made for skateboarding. Those are made for basketball in the 1930s if you're wearing Converse. That's not for marching band anymore. That's style. Don't show up in Crocs. Don't show up in cowboy boots. Don't show up in flip-flops. I mean, there's some no-brainers out there, but that really impacts your ability to perform. I always preach that you have to perform from the ground up. Get your feet right first, not just foot timing while marching, but get your shoe wear right, get your leg strength right, and then start building up from there as far as what you have to do demand-wise. But if you can get shoe wear right, that's one of the best things you can do to prepare for the season. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Marching Health. Big takeaways from this are buy a pair of shoes that feel good and fit your feet. Mini march when you are in the store. Try to mimic some of the marching motions so that you know that shoe's going to work for you. And if possible, get a couple of pairs to get you through the season so you decrease your risk of injury and that you have shoes that are going to last the entire season. Thanks for tuning in.